Hello, and welcome to Matter of Fact, a podcast from the Roy Howard Community Journalism Center, where we report what matters. I'm your host, Halawi Tabebe. With support from the Scripps Howard Foundation, our center works to counter misinformation and strengthen truth-based journalism across communities in Southeast Mississippi. Today's episode focuses on a series of investigations by the center, examining how the closure of one bridge became tied to the future of access to public safety records in Mississippi. The reporting began after the sudden closure of the Davis Bayou Bridge in Ocean Springs. The closure raised questions about whether warning signs were missed and whether inspection records that could shed light on the situation were available to the public. In this episode, we'll explore how this story unfolded, what it reveals about government transparency, and why access to public records are essential for communities trying to understand decisions that affect their safety. We'll also talk with R8CJC reporter Justin Glowacki, who was involved with the public records request and played a key role in covering this project. Last April, while reporting about the sudden closure of the Davis Bayou Bridge in Ocean Springs, our reporters at the center were left with a simple but pressing question. How did this happen, and could it have been prevented? The bridge was shut down on March 5th of 2025, disrupting daily commutes and local traffic, but it also sparked deeper concerns about how infrastructure safety is monitored and what the public is allowed to know about it. Bridge inspections are routine across the United States. Under federal law, bridges on public roads are required to be inspected regularly through the National Bridge Inspection Program, a system designed to detect structural issues before they become dangerous. But when the Davis Bayou Bridge closed, details about its inspection history were not readily available, revealing a communication gap between city, county, and state officials. While working on the original story, our reporter spoke with then Ocean Springs Mayor Kenny Holloway. He emphasized that the only report the city received from the bridge was the notice to shut it down. However, when we spoke with Jackson County officials, they relayed that they knew the bridge was in bad shape and had begun work on a full replacement in 2023. Following a rezoning that left the bridge out of the county's jurisdiction, the rebuilding plan and the responsibility to see it through was handed over to the city of Ocean Springs around September of 2024. To find out more, RACJC reporter Justin Glowacki and others on the team filed a public records request with the Mississippi Department of Transportation seeking bridge inspection reports, structural evaluations, and maintenance records dating back to 2019. The goal was to better understand the timeline leading up to the closure and provide additional context to the center's earlier reporting. But MDOT denied the request. State officials cited a federal law known as 23 U.S. Code Section 407, which restricts the release of certain highway safety data that is compiled for federally funded safety programs. Determined to our cause, the center appealed the denial, arguing that routine bridge inspection reports required under the National Bridge Inspection Standards should not be exempt from the public's information. On April 23rd, attorneys representing the Transportation Department reaffirmed their denial. In a written response, officials referenced U.S. Supreme Court case Pierce County v. Gillian, which upheld protections for certain safety evaluations. In response, the center filed a formal complaint with the Mississippi Ethics Commission, the agency responsible for enforcing the state's public records laws. The commission has the authority to review disputes between public agencies and requesters to determine whether records have been improperly withheld. After a lengthy review, spanning more than 8 months, a hearing officer with the Mississippi Ethics Commission issued a preliminary report finding that MDOT had violated the Mississippi Public Records Act. In January of this year, the Ethics Commission affirmed their suggestion and ruled that the reports should be released under the state's Public Records Act. However, around the same time as the Ethics Commission's ruling, State Representative Steve Massengill introduced House Bill 1660, that would limit public access to roadway safety records, including bridge inspection reports. Despite the bill making it to the Senate, it died in committee this past Tuesday, March 3rd, nearly a year since the closure of the Davis Bayou Bridge. As the story continued to unfold in real time, I sat with R8CJC full-time reporter Justin Glowacki to better understand the behind-the-scenes of this reporting project. Justin has been involved in the story since the beginning, speaking with officials, reviewing infrastructure records, and investigating the broader implications of the bridge closure and the debate over public access to inspection records. Justin, thanks for being here. So, Justin, when you were originally reporting on the closure of the Davis Bayou Bridge, what were some initial thoughts or questions that stuck out to you?
My first thought was, how does the bridge start to look like that so quickly? Because these bridges are supposed to be inspected every year. They're supposed to do underwater inspections. I learned this throughout the course of the story, but they're supposed to do those at least every 5 years. And so that really stood out to me, that we had this bridge in the condition it was in, and it seemingly nobody knew, and that's what really drew me to it.
So in your efforts to find more, what city officials did you speak to first, and what did you learn from their perspectives?
So on the city side of things, I talked to the mayor, former mayor Kenny Holloway. I spoke with him just kind of about, how did you let your bridge get to this state, and how did you not know? Because what happens here, this is the process of how they learn about these bridges. The state sends somebody to go inspect the bridge. The state puts together a report for the cities and the counties for these federally funded roads. The county reads those reports and then sends them to the city. And in this case, the county never sent the reports to the city because the city didn't know that they were supposed to be getting the reports. And so there was just a miscommunication on the side of the city and the county and the state. And I think that really is a problem. And when I was speaking with the state side of things, I spoke with Harry Lee James over at the Office of State Aid Road Construction. He told me that cities can sign up if they want to get these reports directly instead of having it go to the county and then the county sends it to the city. So it would cut out that middleman. And that's what Ocean Springs eventually ended up doing. So now they get those reports directly and they won't have to wait for the county to send it to them. Just so there's no miscommunication now from state, county to city.
Were those conversations any different between city officials compared to maybe people that you spoke to with Jackson County?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the state and county both seemed to know that the bridge was not in great condition. They both said, there's a weight limit on the bridge. The bridge is 30 years old. These wooden bridges typically last, anywhere from 20 to 25 years. They got 30 years out of it. So they were pretty aware that they would have to replace this bridge. And the county actually was starting a plan to replace this bridge, but then the city of Ocean Springs annexed that property. And so the county was no longer pursuing these plans to replace the bridge, and instead just handed the paperwork over to the city and said, here's what we planned for this bridge. Here's, you guys can continue it now since it's your bridge.
When did you realize that the question of the Davis Bayou Bridge closing down and its inspection history, when did you realize that was a question for the state rather than Jackson County or Ocean Springs, where the bridge actually resides?
So the county and city are both responsible for the bridge, but the state is the one who's responsible for the inspection of the bridge. So they house all the reporting, all the data relating to this Hanshaw Road Bridge going over the Davis Bayou. They have all those records. So that's when I realized I have to reach out to the Office of State Aid Road Construction. And when I spoke with Harry Lee James on the phone, he kind of told me, yeah, you could send a public records request for this information, and we should be able to get it over to you. And they sent over, I believe, 2 pages from the most recent report, but that's not what we asked for. We wanted to see more than that. We wanted to see the last 5 years, just to make sure we got that most recent and the previous underwater inspection.
So in an effort to find out more, you and a couple others that were on the team at the time filed a public records request. What was that process kind of like?
Yeah, so I was really not involved with the process. This was 100% student-led, with some oversight between me and our What Is True coordinator at the time, Joshua Wilson. And our student actually submitted this public records request. His name is Evan. That was his first ever public records request. And
how did it come about in the reporting process?
So I obviously wanted to see these reports because on the phone they said we do these reports every 5 years. Let's get 5 years of inspection reports so we can at least see the last underwater inspection report. And we also had some speakers come in from our Arizona campus, the Roy Howard Center over there, and they came in, gave us a little rundown on how to do public records requests to the students. And so we thought, let's get them some practice. Let's do one right now. So Joshua asked me, do we have anything you need public records requests for? And I was like, sure, like I got this information. I would love to know. But typically, I would have the time to do it, but not always when you're running all these stories. So it was great to have Evan there, who did submit this records request, who ended up lasting a little bit longer than I thought.
Right. And like you said, it's been quite a second since the beginning of this, I would say, reporting project. And how have you been able to keep up with this as time goes on, amidst your weekly schedules and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, this story starts over a year ago. So trying to keep up with it is not the easiest thing, but when it is a story that kind of involves you so heavily, you kind of got to check in on it at least, once a month. So when it comes to our ethics commission complaint, that's when we check in every month. Are we on the agenda this month? Are we on the agenda next month? And then just keep doing that to make sure that you're not missing when your case is going to be discussed.
So for anybody who's filed a public records request, how do you go about checking that information as time goes by?
Normally, public records requests don't typically last a whole year. They don't typically go that far out. A typical records request should take no longer. If you're not asking for a lot, sometimes if you ask a lot, they have to be like, this is going to take us a while, give us some time to get it all together. But they will let you know that it's going to take them some time. But typically, I think the law says they have 14 days to get you everything that you want. But sometimes they can delay that if they say, you asked for a lot, we have to go through this information and we'll get it back to you. My other public records requests have gone a lot smoother, like with the Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality. I've requested water inspection reports for the Pascagoula River, and so those ones went a lot easier because MDEQ was very willing to work with me and say, like, here's our records, open for all to see. So Here you go.
So what was kind of that holdup on the state side, other than just purely denying the public records request? Was there some pushback from the state trying to keep certain information classified?
Yeah, so obviously we have House Bill 1660 that was recently put into the legislation that eventually died in the Senate committee earlier this week. So, we were pretty happy about that.
Yes, we were.
But yeah, the state tried to push back because they cite this law. It's called Part 407. It's a federal law that protects bridge inspections from discovery and legal processes in state and federal court. And so that is what the law says. It can't be used in discovery for a lawsuit, and that's not at all what we wanted it for. We are, members of the public who just wanted to get that information. And so we argued it, and that's why we went to the Ethics Commission, and in December we got a preliminary ruling. Yeah, preliminary ruling.
Yeah,
that's what it was called. It was a preliminary ruling that the state needed to hand us these documents. And so come January 19th, chairman of the Transportation Committee in the House, his name is Representative Massengill, he proposed House Bill 1660, which would have put it into law that we can't get that information through public records requests. So Ethics Commission said you have to give it. Next month, a new bill came out that said, well, actually, they're not allowed to ask for that information.
But clearly the bill didn't make it out of the House.
Yeah, it didn't. Well, it made it out of the House. It didn't make it through the Senate.
It didn't make it through the Senate.
It actually went through the House pretty successfully. It was, I think, off the top of my head, I believe the vote was 110-9 voted for it.
What does House Bill 1660 say about government transparency in Mississippi, in your opinion?
In my opinion, so this is, we're trying to hide this information from the public. I understand what the state is saying. The state is saying, we can't give you these documents because if you have them and you publish them, a lawyer can use that information in a litigation strategy. But he can't submit it as evidence in court. And our argument is we are paying for this bridge. Our tax-paying dollars are going towards these roads and bridges, and I think the public deserves to know, what condition is my bridge in that I'm paying for. I think they deserve to know.
And how did you go about balancing that impartiality that you needed to maintain with investigative journalism like this, specifically in regard to contacting government officials?
These are obviously people we're going to have to talk to in the future. If I ever want to do a story on another bridge or another road in Jackson County, I'm going to have to talk to Joe O'Neill. And my goal is to be upfront with them as I go through the reporting process. Here's what I think. Here's what I think the story is going to look like when we eventually put it out. Because if I catch somebody off guard when the story comes out, I mean, that's not a great feeling. I don't want to do gotcha journalism. I want them to know that this doesn't look great for you if you're going to be, lying or trying to hide information. So I try to be upfront, really. I mean, because if they can't be mad at you for telling the truth. They can be, but it's the truth, so you can't really...
And it's still ethical, as long as you're telling them up front from the beginning what's going on.
I really just don't want to catch them off guard, because these are people I will have to talk to in the future. Now, with, the former mayor, obviously he's not in office anymore, but I didn't know that at the time. But, I mean, I was pretty upfront with him, too, because it didn't sound great from his side of things. He didn't know that the bridge was in the state it was in. And I told him that. I was like, how did you not know? He goes, they just didn't tell us. And so I've included clips from that interview, in the story when we eventually ran it. I used the, exact quote of me asking him a question, like, you didn't know? And he says, they didn't tell us.
So it's clear that the communication between state, county, and city levels was definitely not where it needed to be, at least for this situation. How would you say the communication between them impacts the attention that a certain issue deserves?
Well, if the city does not know that the bridge needs to be shut down until it needs to be shut down, that's an issue for the public. And if the city also doesn't know, then that means the public might not know. And for reporters, the public is a great source of information. This, for us specifically, we're community-based journalism, so we're always out in the community asking people about these things. And if, they don't know that their bridge is falling apart, they're not going to know to tell us that their bridge is falling apart. And so that's where it comes down to attention. If there's levels of government that, are I'm not going to say hiding information, but don't share it in the best way, then the public doesn't know, which means that we don't know, because that's where we get our information from too.
And lastly, I just want to ask, from a media literacy standpoint, when lawmakers say a bill protects privacy, what should audiences look for to verify that claim?
What is it protecting? Who is it protecting? I think that is the biggest thing you need to be looking at. With House Bill 1660, it's protecting the state. It's protecting the inspectors. I can understand if you want to make redactions to who these inspectors are, but I can't understand why you would want to redact or make it confidential for the general public to look at these inspection reports. Because to me, I can see you don't want to get sued. I understand that. But you can redact. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So, with this bill specifically, I looked at it and I couldn't put two and two together.
So audiences should pay attention to what it's protecting and why?
Yes. Yeah, so, with bridge inspection reports, why do they not want it to be out there? They don't want to get sued.
Right.
But is that outweigh the public good that they get from being able to see it? I guess that's a question the people in the House, the representatives said, yeah, it's the state outweighs the people.
Yeah. So I guess it's up to us to make our own decisions and make sure we think twice before forming an opinion about something that our city officials don't know enough about, our county officials don't know enough about. How would you say it's, if we were to take that into our own hands as citizens and as residents, how would you go about trying to verify those claims?
When it comes to what? Specifically?
When it comes to infrastructure projects, just projects within their towns and cities in general.
You can generally ask the Department of Transportation for updates on how long things are going to take. I don't think they're too against sharing that information. We actually got a story pitch this week about road construction, so I was probably going to ask the Department of Transportation how long is this going to take. That was about Highway 15 down in D'Iberville, but I haven't done that yet. But I will do that probably later today.
What would you say is the biggest thing you learned from this whole reporting project, and what made it unique from anything you've ever done at the center?
Definitely taking that long to get a public records request. That was definitely unique. That's never happened to me before. I've only ever been denied or just they give it over. In Pennsylvania, we have right to know laws, which are very similar to the Public Records Act, but they're slightly different. The governments in Pennsylvania are much more willing to share information with you if you ask, because they know you're just going to send a public records request in, and they're going to be like, okay, well, now I gotta write down all this paperwork. So typically they just hand it over. In Mississippi, it's a lot more. You have to request it, and it's gonna take 2 weeks, and then you have to pay for it. So that was something completely new to me through this story. But I think my biggest takeaway is, don't stop being curious. That was my biggest takeaway, because I was curious about, how did the bridge end up looking like this in only a year? Because you inspect it every year. How?
And it led to, a wormhole of more information.
A wormhole of more information, and because we don't know how many people got denied. We don't know how many people have requested to see bridge inspection reports, have gotten denied on the basis of, Part 407. So then they just give up, because, they don't know what else to do other than appeal it to the state, and then the state says no as well, because that's what happened to us. The Office of State Aid Road Construction said no. We appealed it, and we got a response from the, one of the Attorney General's office in Mississippi, one of the assistant attorney generals, and they said no too. And so the next step is ethics commission, and not everyone's gonna have time for that, because you might just see a no and then say, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But I think if it's something you really care about and something you're really curious about, it's something you should take to the government. Try to get that information if you care about it.
Thank you for your time, Justin.
No, of course.
This episode was adapted from several RHCJC news stories examining the Davis Bayou Bridge closure, the center's complaint over denied access to bridge inspection records, and the proposed legislation to limit access to roadway safety documents. We'd like to recognize the journalists who contributed to this reporting, including Justin Glowacki, who we spoke to earlier. You can read the full stories at rhcjcnews.com. Be sure to follow us on social media at rhcjcnews to keep up with more stories just like these. As always, thank you for listening and for spending time with us as we take you behind the scenes of the Roy Howard Community Journalism Center. I'm Halawi Tabebe, and this is Matter of Fact.